everyone. Welcome back to the New Earth Leadership Summit, inspiring spiritual entrepreneurs like you to stand in their personal power and become the leaders of New Earth. And I am really excited because with me today, I have Foster Gamble, and he is the researcher, co-writer, visual designer, which I didn't know, which is so cool, of both of the documentaries Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take, and Thrive 2, This Is What It Takes. Previously, Foster was CEO of MindCenter Corporation and an instructor in the nonviolent martial art of Aikido. He was also the on-screen host for the PBS documentary Aikido, The Way of Harmony, and created 3 consulting services: Interaction Dynamics, which is a communication and conflict resolution company, LifeBalance and Zonesport, which he has delivered throughout the country. Welcome to the show, Foster. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Theresa. And Therese, it's an honor to be on with you.
Thank you. You know, I wanted to get started by just asking you, so your documentary Thrive and Thrive 2, I've seen both of them, but the first one was such a pivotal turning point in my own life. It had such a major impact on me. And I want to thank you for that because it really opened my eyes. But I think I saw it back in 2014. It's been out since 2011. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it was such a big eye opener and aha, and it really shifted my mind into how can I start standing up for what I believe in and take action? Because as we're watching things fall apart, it's easy to start feeling helpless. So I want to just ask you, what inspired you to create these documentaries for us?
Well, ever since I was a little kid, I found myself breaking up fights. And, you know, whether it was verbal fights or physical fights on the schoolyard or whatever. And I was a little kid, but I was scrappy and I was committed. And I would constantly be saying to people, this isn't necessary. This isn't necessary. I didn't know at that age, you know, the skills of how to avoid having to do that kind of fighting and so forth. But I really devoted my life to figuring out how can human beings live in harmony with one another and with energy, because it became apparent to me pretty soon that if we don't figure that out, we could obliterate our entire existence.
Right. Wow. So you created the Thrive documentary with your wife, Kimberly. And let's just talk a little bit about the reaction that you got from it. So just because it takes guts to step out and speak your truth, right? Speak the truth, especially the truth when you've done so much research. In fact, can you just share with us a little bit of that nugget about the research you did on the documentaries?
Well, I've been really essentially researching this topic of what's in the way of humanity thriving and what can we do about it all my life, since college. But the commitment was there really as a child, being concerned about, you know, if diving under a desk and putting my head between my arms was the best the adults had to offer in case of nuclear war, it motivated me to really devote my life to figuring out, okay, how can we actually do this thing? How can humanity thrive? So when we made the film, we used to chuckle when we'd be talking to each other as we were creating it, going through, choosing the content, writing the script and so forth. And we'd just be going like, whoa, I don't know whether people are ready for this or not. And we were both absolutely aligned. We need to do this communication because it's vital. We're years ahead in knowing the threat that's coming, but also in knowing what's possible in terms of fixing it. So we need to do this, even if it's completely ignored, even if we have to bury it in some kind of time capsule or broadcast it out into the universe for some other planet that might be in a similar predicament. And from the moment that we launched the film, I mean, the premiere up in San Francisco was sold out in about 12 minutes at 6 a.m. The word had already spread from the trailer, and then it took off and went viral and has never stopped. It's now got over 94 million documented views. That probably means 120 million views with all the people who gather in groups, see it in you know, without formal documentation and that type of thing. So the main thing for us was it was just a huge relief to know that, okay, humanity is not only able to handle this information, they're eager to know what's going on so that we can come up with solutions which are commensurate to the problem.
I mean, it is so life-changing. I'm so happy to hear that it's been so resonant, such a response. I continually reshare it. And I ask people, have you seen it? That when they say no, I'm like, what? Okay, hold on. Let me just, I'm going to get you the link so you can watch it. And it's, I watched it again recently during the times we're going through now. And it's freaking prophetic is what it is. I mean, you were telling us way back then, and we're seeing it all come out to play in the open now. So how do you feel about the fact that the whole agenda is so exposed? What feelings does that create for you?
Well, the fact that we were right about the agenda for global domination doesn't feel great. I really wish we were wrong.
Yeah.
However, everything that we've said in that film is turning out to be true. We had 68 outrageous claims, but we'd done our homework for decades. We had hired professional fact checkers, real fact checkers, not the ones they got now, for months to verify everything. And if anything was in doubt at all, we just didn't put it in the film. Yeah. So, but once it was confirmed that, yes, this is in fact going on, then we saw, we were gratified to be able to play a pivotal role in just waking people up all over the world to, we are under a dire threat. It's a secret threat. It's what they call quiet weapons for silent wars. But it's all coming out where people can see it. When people have to take toxic, they're mandated to take toxic injections, and their businesses are shut down, and their kids can't go to school, and they're supposed to wear masks. And then the same culprits are starting these wars and collapsing economies and getting rid of borders artificially and all of this. The agenda that we described in there is now coming out into public view 10 years later. So what we feel great about is that people are catching on by the hundreds of millions, if not billions already, all over the world.
I mean, so this actually brings up a question I have, because when I spoke to you and Kimberly earlier, you talked about being ready to accept the consequences of your actions. Can we talk a little, because I know that I think people have a perception of consequences for bad choices, but there are consequences for good, aren't there?
That's well said, yeah.
So can you share with us some of what you have done has definitely not only communicated leadership, but you're an example of leadership. And we're going to talk more about the New Earth leadership itself. It is scary to stand in front. And I'd like to express to people, because I know that there's fear to step out, to stand in your truth, to stand in your power. We're asking people in this summit to consider standing in their power. And I think that, at least for my own sake, being clear about consequences has helped me take one step at a time. I'm like, okay, this could have backlash. This could really bite me in the butt. And yet my heart is aligned to it. So can you just share from your experience being out there so far in front, what it's like?
Well, we were fortunate to befriend David Icke before the movie came out, and he was in the film, and we just really took the opportunity to ask him, because he had already been doing it for 20 years or something like that. So he shared with us very genuinely. He said, if you're not already out of it, at some point you will need to break out of what he calls the hassle-free zone. And that's where you behave just right, you say the right things, all your friends feel comfortable around you, the powers that be don't feel threatened by you. So you're just getting along. And then when you really understand what's going on and decide to take action, there's no way that you can be effective without telling the truth. The truth is reality itself. It's the unified field. And when you have that power on your side, then you are ultimately unstoppable, or at least your ideas are. However, that's not a popular thing to do. The powers that be have made sure that it's very uncomfortable because they don't want to be exposed in their corruptions. They don't want to lose their power to an actual society of sovereign beings. So what David Icke was meaning, and Catherine Austin Fitts warned us of the same thing, said, when you come out, one side will go after you. And then once they realize you're real, the other side will go after you. And that'll be even more brutal. Catherine used to say, if you're not taking flack, you're not over the target yet. Well, we started taking flack immediately. And there were, the government, corporations, everybody was putting up sites to try to debunk Thrive. Fortunately, I'm highly trained in the martial arts, particularly in Aikido, as you mentioned. So I know a lot about keeping your center, being humble enough to move your center, but that ultimately your real power comes from connecting with the truth of the universe, with the energy of the divine. So that was never shaken. And for both Kimberly and me, after the film came out, there was a time we were actually traveling down in New Mexico. We were out for lunch and there was all this subterfuge, even from former friends, going on, trying to dismantle us in the public eye. And there were these articles coming out. There were total lies. Meanwhile, we were traveling. We attended a massive screening of Thrive in Santa Fe. And then we visited a free energy lab. And then we visited with a person who's had ongoing contact with extraterrestrials. We were only getting absolute confirmation of everything we talked about. Meanwhile, even a lot of our old friends, but the general public was going nuts trying to stop Thrive because it was just either shaking up their businesses or their power or even simply their worldview. But we were at lunch one day and we were seeing these articles that were coming in, and we looked at each other and Kimberly just cracked up laughing. I mean, she could not stop. The waiter came over, was like, "Are you okay?" And she said, "You can't even talk." "I'm fine, I'm fine." And finally I said, "So Kimberly, what's going on?" And she said, "I just broke out of the hassle-free zone. I don't care any longer what anybody who I don't respect thinks about me. My commitment is 100% to the truth and it will never change." And I was in the same place. And from that moment on, we've never looked back. Now it's just a matter of what's the best use of us each day.
This is such a great point that you're bringing up. I love that you call it breaking out of the hassle-free zone. When I hear that, I hear the end of people pleasing.
Yes.
Right. So, and there's a lot of beautiful souls out there who are on that service to others path, who are really in the people pleasing space, because we are equating people pleasing with being of service.
Yes.
So how do we break that apart in the mind? I mean, how do we break that apart, or your perception of that?
Well, I think by way of addressing that, I've been thinking a lot about the title of your conference, your summit, which I think is just fantastic. New Earth Leadership.
Yeah.
What is that? I'm a philosopher and a scientist first. And so I always try to define everything that I deal with. If I'm going to be in a debate or a deep conversation with folks, I always ask for definition of terms first. So I at least know what they're talking about, and they know what I'm talking about. So I actually looked up lead, because lead means to go before or with, to show the way. Now that's very different than command, than control, than dictatorship. And so then leadership is simply the position or function of a leader, a person who guides or directs a group. So guiding and directing is very different than mandating, is very different than forcing or coercing. And fundamentally, a lot of people, when they talk about our political leaders and so forth, it's a critical distinction to unpack, is that leadership is voluntary. People follow a leader voluntarily. There is no command, there is no coercion. So I invite people who are listening to this to just think for a moment. Think of someone that you really like to be around, that someone that you like to listen to, that you really want to collaborate with over time, and ask yourself, well, why is that? And my suggestion is that they are natural leaders, and that a natural leader is someone who is intrinsically showing anyone who's interested the way. And the way, in the martial art of Aikido, the Aikido, the Japanese kanji, the do means the way. So Aikido means the way of being in harmony with life energy. So I think that a real leader is someone who has worked on themselves enough to become masterful, not perfect, not finished, but masterful in the sense of they're really fully engaged in learning. And they've gotten good at human being. And by that, I mean, like if you were learning to ride a two-wheeler, at first, you'd fall off and this and that, and then ultimately you get it, and you may not be an expert bicycle rider, but you know how to balance a two-wheeler. That's what I'm talking about, mastery of being, and someone who is aligned with the unified field. There's an old expression, I can't remember who said it, but it's always guided me. It says that genius is knowing what's in your heart, because that's what's in everyone's heart. And that's what I think a leader is doing. A leader is listening to their own inner guidance, and they are relaxing their body so that the body can just be free to do what it does. They're letting their emotions flow responsibly and accountably, but freely in appropriate situations. And they have learned how to focus their mind and how to open their mind simultaneously. And then also they've learned to interact with other people in a harmonious way. When someone is capable of doing that, other human beings are simply going to be attracted to be around and learn from that person. And that, to me, those are the hallmarks of leadership. Then those people will naturally be leading in directions that are good. They'll be ultimately good for everyone. They'll be good for the planet, for the animals, the insects, the plants, and for human beings, ultimately, even for the psychopaths who are trying to control everything, because they're desperate, they're afraid, they're scared to death. And even they need this same type of healing. So for me, that's what leadership is. And the more clearer we are on that, the clearer we can unpack what it is that we need to do to move into seeking the truth and sharing the truth rather than just trying to fit in.
I love that definition. And as you were speaking about it, I was tapping in and saying, okay, who do I see as a leader? Obviously, I was like, you and Kimberly as well. And what I love about your leadership and my reaction to it is I can feel it's a different type. I can feel it's a higher vibrational, because I don't feel allegiance, like I have to follow everything you say. But I see your integrity. Yeah. And that draws me in. And so I naturally am listening. I'm naturally going, well, let me just check over there and see what they're saying. But it's not this feeling of, the old paradigm idea of leadership, which I really think our old paradigm is not leadership, but control. That's it. It's yes, control. And they exactly. Want allegiance.
And as we figure that out, we will be able to create a new earth. And when I was thinking about, okay, what to me is a new earth, and I created a slide of this. It was so important to me that if I can, I'll share my screen and Please. Put this up for a moment. Because to me, the new earth is a thriving earth. So the next natural question is, what is thriving? And one working definition is thriving is living in optimal health, well-being, caring relationship, and prosperity in every aspect of life. Now, that's easier to say than it is to do. It actually needs a tremendous amount of skill to be doing that on a daily basis. And therefore, it really, no matter how experienced you are, it needs daily practice.
That makes sense. So what would a daily practice look like in in your eyes? Like, or what, I imagine that we're all going to find our version of that daily practice,
Yes.
but are there some pillars of this practice that might be consistent from person to person?
Well, in Thrive 2, we broke out what we refer to as the science of love, because everybody wants love.
Yeah.
And however you think of it or define it, everybody wants it. And I think the more mature we get, the more expansive our understanding of what love is. It's way beyond, I love my dog and I used to love that person, but I don't love them anymore. Now I love, it's way beyond that. Like I said, the term I means harmony or love from Aikido. And that to me is the great love. And to me, that experience of love that we're all after begins with aligning fully with the unified field. And I described how to do that physically, emotionally, mentally, and interpersonally. When we can do that, then we also need to do it environmentally, because we're on the earth, but we're also of the earth. And we can't survive without it. It's our life support system. So for me, the science of love is not really some vague thing. So in terms of daily practice, and I've had probably 50 different practices from, my first was sports, and then it went to Zen meditation, then it went to self-hypnosis and yoga and Aikido and karate and Tai Chi and all sorts of different meditations. And like you said, Therese, it's not a matter of doing the practice, it's doing the practice that serves you at that particular time. And to me, what I recommend to folks, and we in our solutions hub, which we can talk about later, we've got courses and documents that help people along what we call the path of purpose. And I recommend that people look into those 4 levels, the physical, emotional, mental, and interpersonal, and ask yourself, where do I need the most work? And then just go out and find the best mentors you can and go after it. The interpersonal stuff, I probably spent at least 8 years dedicated with the best teachers I could find anywhere in the world. And it's continued to this day. But after those 8 years, it was working in my life, and I was qualified to begin teaching those things. So I just recommend that people look at all those different skills that we need and keep filling them out broader and broader. And then it'll feel simpler and simpler. It's not a matter of remembering a lot of stuff. It's not a matter of really trying hard. It's a matter of understanding clearly and then disciplining yourself to be true to the natural principles and to your own inner guidance.
Such a good point. When I think of New Earth, I like to look at the frequencies or the densities. So I love to read The Law of One. It's a really resonant material for me. But they talk about the levels of consciousness being different densities, and we're moving to a higher level of consciousness where we are coming back to the principles of love, like you were talking about. And we're really choosing, if we're choosing the higher frequency, we're choosing to step into collective consciousness where we are consciously choosing to see that we're connected. We're consciously choosing to recognize that what happens to you is happening to me, and therefore I work for your good as well as my own, right? And so when you're talking about these practices, I'm thinking about what's my core, like you were talking about before. Where's my center? Where's the core of it for me? And I realize it's literally what I tell my kids all the time. So I always talk about the golden rule, right? Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And so whatever practice I do, I'm looking to see if that expands in me. If I'm less resistant or less judgmental as I'm doing the practice. Am I allowed to hold people, even people I see as drastically different? So even this group that shows, I call them the negative timeline group. That's what I call them. Mm-hmm. And I even in my practice, I do loving kindness practice, and I send them love and healing because I'm like, we're not disconnected from them. And I kind of feel like even though we don't approve, we don't have to accept or approve or allow what's happening. I don't see it fully resolving until we bring the energy together, right? Bring them into your heart in some way. And I just wanted to share that with you and just get your response to it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic point. I'd like to share one other image with you.
Please.
When you're talking about densities, this came to mind. One of my mentors was a man named Arthur Young, who's one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. He was a philosopher, mathematician, who invented the helicopter as an experiment to figure out and record how consciousness manifests into the material world. He literally went down to the patent office and said, I'm doing this experiment, but while I'm inventing something, I want to invent something useful. So what's needed? And he went through the different things, and he thought, okay, they told him, well, we need something that takes off vertically and can carry significant weight over distances. And he goes, oh, that sounds like a worthy one. And he spent the next 12 years inventing the helicopter, but meanwhile documented the entire process in what he calls the Bell Notes. He ultimately was hired and sold the intellectual property to Bell Helicopter, and that was the first major helicopter. Wow. But so this was his masterwork, comes down to what he calls the arc and the grid. And this is the arc on the screen right now, where he came up with a cosmology for how consciousness is evolving throughout the universe at every scale, and offered a case of champagne to anyone who could prove him wrong. And that was like 50 years ago, and no one has. So, and what he's describing is that the universe evolves in octaves, and yes, and just like sound and light and smell and the Enneagram, again and again, it always comes back to this octave, and there's reasons for that. But what he showed was, and I'll show you on this arc here, it starts with pure potential. It means the least possible density, just pure potential of space, and then it begins to contract. And the spark of energy, calls it the monad, contracts into the pushing and pulling of the nuclear forces. And then it takes on an identity. It wraps itself in a shell and becomes an atom. And the spark of consciousness has an identity for the first time. Then the atoms combine into molecules, and this is the most dense form. Now, so the universe is evolving through becoming more dense, and then once it reaches the most dense form, then those molecules begin to expand. Now it's going to lesser density. So the molecules begin to grow as a plant. And then the same spark of consciousness develops the ability to move. Now it can grow and move as an animal. And then ultimately in this particular octave, it can grow, which we do, it can move, which we do, but it can reflect on the entire arc. It can reflect on the entire universe. So that's the 7th level of this particular arc. And then there's sub-arcs in each one of those, and each one of those fractal sub-arcs also is contracting into more density and then expanding out. And I believe, and Arthur thought also, that humanity in the octave of human consciousness evolution is in the same place where molecules were in the universal arc. And what molecules had to do was to learn how to master ambient temperature. It needed to balance the temperature outside the molecule with the temperature inside the molecule. And once it did that, then all of life as we know it became possible. Well, we're at that same arc as human beings, where we've got basically, as Bucky Fuller said, we got 2 options. We're at a fork in the road, and it's either oblivion or it's utopia. So what we need to do, I believe, is that we need to master our inner world and our outer world. This is the science of love that I was talking about. And when we can live harmoniously inside ourselves and with others and with the environment, then creativity will be unleashed on planet Earth beyond any of our current imaginings. And I believe we'll also be welcomed into the cosmic family, because we will have outgrown the self-destructive behavior that has us on the brink of extinction at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with you at that. And I've got the tingles and the chills because looking at this, it is so in alignment with that law of one material. They talk about the octaves. They say that they're endless and that there are steps in between each note, right?
Yes.
And so what you've just shown us is blowing my mind because I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody
Yeah.
illustrated it for us visual learners. I love that. So let's talk. So mastering the inner world and the outer world is a science of love. I'm just letting that sink in. It's just, so let's talk about, we talked about the daily practice. That's steps to start doing that. And our center, each one of us, we're being called in a different way. Yes. I mean, you're seeing that with the people you're working with. So
Mm.
when we're talking to this audience, and there, I feel like there is blooming audience members and there's the potential blooming audience members. And for those who are blooming, you already know what center is calling you and you're moving forward to that. For those who are at the potential of blooming, how would you guide them to connect with that center past the needs to people please or do it right or be the good girl or boy, right? Getting
Mhm.
past that and finding center.
That's a powerful question, and it's the very first one that we address in our Path of Purpose work in the Solutions Hub, which is we invite people, if they have never done so, just to sit down and look inside and ask themselves, what is my purpose in life?
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing how little we are encouraged to do that in schools, in business, and so forth. And it really is the essence of who we are. I believe that we are all a toroidal energy field, and that toroidal energy field is purpose itself. It is held intact by the intention of consciousness, but then the spin axis, that still point that goes through that torus, that has direction. It's like a vector in physics, and that direction is our purpose. So it's not like someone else needs to convince us what our purpose is, or we need to go get one somewhere. No, we are purpose itself. And when I lead workshops, it's rare that anyone takes more than about 15 minutes to realize what their purpose is. And once they are clear on what their purpose is, here's an example. My purpose, as I recognize it currently, is to every day learn to live more and more in alignment with the light. I just call the divine energy running through me, I just call it the light because I've had many direct experiences, and there's nothing more simple that I can use to define it than that. So my purpose is to learn every day, to learn to live more and more in alignment with that light, and then share that light and how to do that out to the world with anyone who's interested as effectively as I can. So once you're clear on your purpose, then we invite people to, okay, well, if you want to make a difference in life, it's useful next to ask yourself, well, what sector do I especially want to work in?
Yeah.
Do I want to work in the arts or spirituality or media or economics or environment, relations, whatever it is? We have 13 what we call the sectors that seem to cover all of human endeavor. And we worked on those for 10 years with people like Barbara Marx Hubbard and many others to come to alignment on those distinctions. And once you decide what sector you want to work on, most likely you're already studying in that sector. You may be a professional, you're a lawyer in justice or a doctor in health, therapist in relations or something like that. Once you know what sector you want to work on, then choose what issue. And so there's a specific issue you want to work on, getting rid of child abuse or getting rid of GMOs or whatever it is. And then even take one step further beyond the issue. And most people have never thought of this. What level of engagement am I most interested in? And by that, we mean, are you someone who wants to meet immediate needs? Doctors Without Borders or working in a soup kitchen, something like that. Or are you someone who would rather spend your time improving systems? So we call it systemic change, working with a political system or a communication system, educational systems, whatever it is. because the better the systems that you have, the more people get their immediate needs met. And then there's one third and final distinction. And I think probably a lot of people listening to this are in this category, which is worldview itself. We call it the consciousness shift. And because your worldview determines the systems that you will create, and the systems create the results that you will have. So there's none of them that are any better than any others. It's just what's right for you. And the most highly leveraged is worldview, because that's literally aligning human consciousness with the truth of the unified field. And the less you're aligned, the denser you feel. The less more it's like being in a bad dream when you can't fully move. The clearer you get on who you really are, what you're up to, how to handle your emotions and thoughts, and how to relate to other people successfully, the more free you will feel, and the more effective you will be in the world. Let me add one thing to that, because one of my teachers years ago literally wrote the book for teenagers on self-esteem, and he had 4 very useful distinctions. And he said self-esteem is gained actually finally in this order. And the first distinction, he said, was belonging. And that's why it's for people who've been abandoned as children or abused or something like that, it's particularly challenging to feel like you belong even in your family, much less in your community, much less in the universe. But once you find belonging, a lot of people through the consciousness movement have discovered their true self and discovered their cosmic family. So it's made a huge contribution to people just feeling like, okay, I get it. I am one with the universe. I truly belong. Well, once you get that, you have access to the power of the universe. And that's a big deal. So you've got to hone your antenna. And the way you do that is to realize your uniqueness. Don't just follow along with other people. Don't just believe what other people say. Recognize that you have your own source of guidance. You have your own unique personality, your own path, which is like no one else's. And so from belonging, you access the field. Uniqueness, now you've got an antenna. You're bringing the energy in. So the next one, once you start bringing the energy in, you get a tremendous amount of power. And you find a lot of cult gurus and psychopaths who are out there. They've accessed a lot of power, but they don't know what to do with it. And so it's actually can be dangerous. So the key, once you access your power, is to go, okay, well, where do I want to direct this power? And that's the 4th level after belonging, uniqueness, and power is purpose, because that's what gives direction or aligns the direction of your torus. And that's where it leads fully into the path of purpose in our Solutions Hub.
That's so powerful. Thank you for breaking that down. I feel like those are the steps right there for us to step into that new earth leadership. I mean, if we could just identify each of those levels,
yes,
we would already just move right in, right? We would move right into that alignment.
Well, one of my main goals is to save people time. I've been privileged to be able to follow these questions my entire life. A lot of people don't have the time to do that. So I figured the best use of my privilege was, okay, use the freedom that I have to go after the truth and then share that truth with other people. So that was the purpose of Thrive One, was to, somebody can sit down and in 2 hours, they get 30 years of research, condensed and cohered. And that's what we did with Thrive 2. That's what we're doing with the Solutions Hub, is just inviting people to learn from our experience and other mentors of ours, other allies of ours, to save yourself the time. We don't have any extra time. We are in World War III right now. Even if some people don't know it, it's going on. The risks are very great, and therefore our responses need to be even greater.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to clarify for those who are watching so that you can get more information. If you haven't seen the Thrive documentaries, I really hope that you will get off of this summit, go watch the first one. It's on YouTube for free. You can find it under Thrive Movement, right? I think that's your channel, is Thrive Movement.
No, now it's Thrive On. That was the old one.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Thrive On. So we can see the first one for free. Thank you. And I wanted to share with people that the conversation about the torsion field, you go into such beautiful depth around that. And if you're not familiar with the term and how it connects to the quantified field. You've got, I mean, the first half of the documentary beautifully lays that out. And then I wanted to point out in the second documentary, Thrive 2, the sectors of purpose. That was one of the talks that I mean, there's so much good stuff in both of these, but the sectors of purpose was like a light bulb went off in my head when I saw that. Like, you broke it down so beautifully, and I could start to, like you said, just looking at that, I instantly understood where I hang out in the sectors of purpose and at what level that I want to participate. So I really just want to encourage people, and you can rent Thrive 2 in the at Thrive, is it thriveon.org?
Thriveon.com.
Thriveon.com. So you
and
can
here are the sectors that Therese was referring to.
Yeah, can we talk about it just really quick? Because this literally, my mind expanded. I felt pretty clear about purpose, but the way that you broke it down in that second documentary, I was like, I know exactly what sector I hang out in.
Great.
So,
and may I ask what that is?
Well, it's weird. I'm in between arts and spirituality. I feel like there's a thread that connects those. But as you've laid it out on this screen, honestly, I would even add science to that, because your approach is very similar to how I approach it. I understand the esoteric level of spirituality, but I really love it when I can point at it. I really love it when I can say, and this is how it's happening right now. This is like exactly what it looks like, you know, when this energy works together. And you do such a beautiful job illustrating that for people so they can start to see it. And, you know, once you start to see it, you can't unsee that. It's like you start to see how it works everywhere. So thank you for sharing those with us. I want to go over and talk about the Thrive portal now, because it is a bustling place. And I know that this is just one of the areas you and Kimberly are working in. You also, actually, let's step back 1 second. You also have been doing a lot of work with free energy. Was that a byproduct of the documentary, or did that actually come before the documentary?
It came before the documentary, because I had committed myself from the age of 14 to try to figure out how can humanity relate effectively to energy. And that means on every level, from electricity to spiritual energy to interpersonal energy and so forth. And when it took me into the geometry of nature, I began to really study deeply the patterns of nature, and then realized that the very advanced things that I was discovering were known by cultures thousands of years ago. And that blew my mind. And then that began to take me into not only ancient cultures, but ancient cultures, they're all revealing these visits that they've had from these burning ships that come from the sky. And then these beings are showing them these secrets and so forth. So that blew my mind once again. And then ultimately that led to, okay, well, if they were visiting here from other planets, much less solar systems or galaxies, they must have been very advanced, and they're not burning oil on the way here. So they must have been able to access energy anywhere and everywhere in space. And that started me studying people like Nikola Tesla and Stanley Meyer and T. Townsend Brown, you know, the grandfathers of free energy. And then I saw that they were all being suppressed and killed and disappeared and gag ordered and had their patents stolen and all this type of thing. So that actually was my major introduction to global corruption. So I was like, okay, if they actually don't want us to have access to clean, free, inexpensive energy, then what else are they doing? And sure enough, I started looking at the failures that I was seeing in education and in media and on in money. And when I followed the money in each of those areas, it always led back to the same secret societies, the same organizations, a lot of the same individuals. And that's when I got it. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, there is no wonder they don't want us to use the word conspiracy, because the whole thing is a giant conspiracy against humanity thriving.
Yeah, no, I mean, It's hard to look at. It's really dark. And that's actually one of the things I really appreciate about Thrive, the first Thrive, of What on Earth Will It Take? Because like I was saying to you before, you did a very good job at presenting it in a non, fear alarmist way. You're like, okay, this is how this is who you are. This is like this energy that's in you, and it's in this, and it's over here, and we're all connected, and look at what you can do when you access it. And I was like, oh, yay. And then you're like, and
Right.
and then the penny drops. But at that point, already feeling really empowered and really like, if this is the reality of energy, what else can we do? Right. That was the thought that was guiding me. So as I'm watching this, I was like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
as it's unfolding, I'm like, I got to do something about that. But in that documentary, you also pointed at ways in which we could take those small actions, because it's easy to feel powerless when you see the corruption on such a large scale. It's easy to go, well, I guess we're cooked. And we're not. And so, I appreciate you bringing it out there and just talking about those little ways that we can take our power back. I loved the conversation about voting with your money. That one was one of the ones that really like went right in. I was like, okay, I can do that. I can move the funds where I feel it's more appropriate or more in alignment.
Yeah.
So that was really powerful. So now let's go over to the Thrive Freedom Portal, because there's so much work that you are presenting there. You're constantly in conversation with us, and helping start the awareness, but also how you can step into action. And it's not something that's, again, that you have to go abandon your life to do.
Well, the Freedom Portal is exactly that. It was designed to open a communication portal with humanity and beyond. And then through that portal to have really honest, important conversations, and to share critical media, and then ultimately to move toward collaboration on effective solutions. So it's coming up on 2 years now. It's a show that I do 3 times a month for a couple of hours on a Saturday. And it's in 3 different formats. One is what we call 7 levels deep, where I pick a particular topic. We do one theme for the month, and it's usually a sector. It's environment, or it's education, or it's economics, or something like that. So the 7 levels deep, I usually do a quick historical survey of what's happened, for instance, in economics, all the way back to, tally sticks and puka shells, up to now central bank digital currency scams and so forth. So that's the 7 levels deep. And then the second one is I call worldview pioneers. And that's where I bring on cutting edge thinkers in different sectors to share their level of expertise on what they're seeing in terms of corruption and what they're seeing in terms of how we can solve these problems and actually thrive. And then the third one we call network dialogues. And that's when we do it in a Zoom meeting format, and everybody's got their cameras and their mics, and we can turn them all on. And we just have a giant family discussion. And people are really appreciating having community. So many people are stepping out of the hassle-free zone, and it can be very lonely at first. A lot of people feel like, I just lost 95% of my friends just because I stood up for what I know to be true. And what's happening, and we see it in the Freedom Portal all the time, but it's happening everywhere, is that the people who are stepping out are finding new friends very quickly. And the friendships are way deeper than the ones that they so-called lost, because they're not based on having to agree. They're not based on religion or geography or race or creed or gender or age, any of that stuff. They're actually based on truth, a loyalty to being able to be authentic with each other, and ultimately then dedicating the energy to setting us all free. So that's the Freedom Portal. And I invite people to come on over and subscribe. You can do a 10-day free trial and check out our archives. We've got just fabulous people from David Icke to Greg Braden and Nassim Haramein and Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Catherine Austin Fitz. It's just, I'm so privileged to just be in conversation with these people about the most important topics that I know to explore. And then what we found is that when people are awakened by Thrive 1 and Thrive 2, or by other things in their lives, and they begin to join into the conversation, either the Freedom Portal or with other people or organizations in their lives, ultimately there's a point at which you get saturated with information and you go, okay, I get it, but now what can I do? And that's we are there worldwide. And so fortunately, both Kimberly and I, even before we met, have had fortunately successful careers as activists for the last 30, 40 years. So we know a lot about what it takes, particularly the principles that make actions successful, and then the principles of collaboration. So we finally decided to that our next big thing to offer humanity beyond the movies and the Freedom Portal was what we call the Thrive Solutions Hub. And the purpose of the Thrive Solutions Hub is to allow ethical solutionaries worldwide to find each other and then to share resources, share important communications, and then collaborate effectively, either locally or virtually, in such a way that our intention is to help facilitate the largest and most powerful and effective grassroots movement in human history. And that's because we now have the internet. And so, in these days of censorship where, we have our own servers that are redundant in multiple countries, anything, you can encrypt anything that you want when you're working there. There are a number of large, very effective activist organizations already working. We're in the beta test phase right now and planning on launching in the fall, probably in October. We're just fine tuning the user interface to make sure that it's as user-friendly as possible, and also just making sure that the security is battened down. And then we've been inviting groups. We've got probably 150 groups and over 1,000 individuals who are just trying it out. And they're really loving it because, we've had groups say to us, thank you for saving us millions of dollars in years, because we've needed a place where we could not only talk privately, these are doctors and lawyers and activists and so forth, inventors, but also where we can find like-minded people instantaneously all over the world, and then collaborate on actions and expand our reach, all that type of thing. So that's the Thrive Solutions Hub. If you join the Freedom Portal, then that allows you you're automatically invited to join the Solutions Hub. Otherwise, you can check out the landing page on it now, and then we'll be opening it to the public in the fall, as I mentioned. And I think that the image that's been coming to my mind recently is like a honeybee. If you step on a honeybee or swat a honeybee or something like that, it might sting you and it's going to hurt. However, if you swat an entire swarm of honeybees, they're all going to be after you, and you're going to have to get out of Dodge as quickly as you can. You got to change your behavior when the whole swarm coordinates. And that's what we're doing. We're basically creating a completely decentralized, open source, encrypted swarm worldwide to take on every single major issue in an entirely ethical way. And by ethical, I mean fully in alignment with the non-aggression principle.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for creating that. And I wanted to share with the audience that you have access to the link to get a 7 or 10 day free pass to the Freedom Portal that Foster is giving us. So thank you so much for that gift. And before we go, because I know you're so busy, you got a lot to do, but I want to ask you one last question, because you said something to me that really touched my heart. You had mentioned last time we talked that you have a daily prayer that the next generation will take up the mantle, that the fight, or I don't even know if we want to call it a fight if we're talking non-aggression, but the purpose.
It's a challenge.
The challenge, the opportunity is with us. And What would your hope for the future be? I think people are doing it. We're here. We're going to
Yeah.
continue to go.
Yeah, I'm remarkably confident about our future. And that shocks people because I know so much bad news. So it's not out of ignorance or just, I don't just put on rose-colored glasses and go, kumbaya, I hope it'll work out.
Right.
I'm sure it will. I'm so deep down all the rabbit holes that I can see the light at the other end of the tunnel, because I know that the people who are perpetrating this global domination agenda, they have to fight the entire energy of the unified field. And that is impossible in the long term. That's unsustainable. What is sustainable is aligning everything we do in our own person, in our projects, in our organizations and clubs and associations, everything we do with the principles of the unified field. That is what is sustainable. So I had mentioned to you that when Kimberly and I were making Thrive 2, one of the things we said was that we really put out a prayer to the universe, introduce us to the natural leaders of the next generations who can carry this torch forward successfully. And you know how it is when you do a sincere request of the universe like that, and you mean it, the response from the universe has been overwhelmingly wonderful. And my hope for the future is that we have the truth, we've got love, and we've got the life force on our side. And then there's people like Therese Tucker out there and hundreds of others. I literally have a list now that we call next generation torchbearers. And after I met you, I immediately added you to the list because I'm so proud of what you're doing. This is exactly what it takes.
Thank you. Oh my God, I'm going to cry right now. Honestly, like, if people don't know this, but ever since I watched the first one, I'm like, I've got to meet these people. I was like, please God, let me get to talk to them. I have so many questions. So the call was mutual, by the way. Like, I heard yours and you heard mine. So I so appreciate, I mean, that's the unified field right there. That's just one example of what it looks like. There are so many more great conversations that Foster and Kimberly are having over at Thrive. I really encourage you, if you feel in alignment with this, to go click on that link, go over there, check it out. It is beautiful. I mean, there's crap out there. There always will be, but the power is with us. And when we get together, we are unstoppable. And you will see that when you watch these documentaries, exactly what that looks like. So thank you so much for sharing all that research, all that wisdom, and being an amazing leader of New Earth Energy. It is so appreciated.
You are welcome. And just one last thing for anybody who's listening. The punchline of all of our work is we already have what it takes to thrive. That's what we discovered. And now it's just a matter of learning about it, getting together with like-minded people and doing it, and allowing yourself to have a great time while we're doing it.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful note to end on. Thank you to everyone watching the summit. You are so important in this world, and I hope that you're feeling your center and your purpose. And I look forward to seeing you at the next episode of the New Earth Leadership Summit. Stay magical.